from Ukrainian President Zelensky.
And guy who apparently unlocks his phone with his fist.
Who I think Putin has significantly underestimated.
President Zelensky just said.
I'm sure you're just like me. Before February 24th, you'd probably also never heard the name Volodymyr Zelensky before. And now, well, now we can't go a day without hearing it. I guess it makes a lot of sense considering what's happening in Ukraine as we speak. The 25th of February might have been the day the world, myself included, began getting to know this young Ukrainian president. That world before Russia invaded seems so far away now. As the bombs drop in and around the capital city of Kyiv, I began wondering to myself, what must this man's days look like? When does he get a moment to sleep or eat? All I ever see is him talking to governments around the world, on the battlefield, fighting with every last breath for his country, hearing those words every time he signs off. Slava Ukraine, a line now as iconic and memorable as the classic American president's speech send-off.
May God bless you all. May God protect our troops.
I wanted to understand who this man was and who he's become in such a short amount of time. A month ago, he was just another president in a country next door to Russia that's faced attacks for decades since the USSR fell. Now he's not just any president, he's now a wartime president. The world watches his every move as he defies every expectation many burden him with from the moment the tanks cross the border. Maybe we have PTSD after how quickly the Afghan government fell in 2021 after the US pulled its troops and the Taliban took over, all within the space of mere days. So how did we get it so wrong? What has Zelensky been doing every day that's made him an effective rallier of leaders, governments, and people around the world? That's what I wanted to find out. This is a day in the life of Volodymyr Zelensky. Morning. As I began trying to research Zelensky, I kept seeing the same thing over and over again: praise. The praise was intense, and sometimes blocked more important stories about the conflict from reaching the top of my search results. Sometimes, the praise is so prominent that I started seeing names I never expected to see in headlines around the conflict. And that was all the comparisons to Winston Churchill. Don't believe me? It's making the rounds just about everywhere.
I wrote calm, heroic, unprecedented is just, what's the parallel, right? Churchill during the Blitz, but not even Churchill faced the imminent threat that President Zelensky faces.
I wanted to understand how he managed to be this leader who was able to get people to listen and maybe do things they would never do. I mean, for heaven's sake, this man got Germany to send weapons and cancel Nord Stream 2. This was unreal. Germany, of all people. It was a shock, and I think everyone collectively wondered, how was that even possible? It was not just Russia's invasion. It was Zelensky speaking directly to the German government and its people, explaining that this attack on Ukraine was an attack on Europe and democracies around the world. And this worked. Like, it really worked. There's a lot of credit to be shared in the unified response. Some are louder than others, but there's always been one consistent person whose face now appears at least once a day talking to some body of people. And that's Zelensky. I was surprised to find out that Zelensky was once an actor. I wondered how everyone took him seriously until now, and it turns out they didn't. I think many people just assumed that this young, inexperienced politician was in over his head. Maybe they were right then, but he's been shaped by a moment. And he's done, I think, the best job a leader could do given the circumstances. The rise of Zelensky in politics started before he even entered politics. Before 2018, when he entered politics, he was an actor, comedian, screenwriter, director, producer, and even a dancer. He had some production company in Ukraine, and one of his most significant claims to fame was a television series called Servant of the People. This part I found amusing, because in the show, Zelensky plays a teacher who accidentally becomes the president. I'm no pro at foreshadowing, but this is a masterclass right here. So, come 2018, Zelensky and a group of his closest friends and allies start a political party. Take a guess at what the name of this party is. If you guessed Servant of the People, you're the winner. And you just won the chance to subscribe to my channel. Anyway, so this immediately started rumors of him running for office. But shocker, he rejected the claims. Then, to nobody's surprise, he announced on New Year's Eve that he was running for president. The campaign is bitter, but aren't they all? He wins 70 73% of the vote, which means the other guy must have downright sucked. And boom, Zelensky is the president of Ukraine. I didn't know about this back then, but I'm sure everyone was shocked as hell to hear he won. So Zelensky wins, and Ukraine becomes a utopia that Putin ends up destroying. That's the story, right? Wrong. This guy was up against a mountain of issues. Sure, Putin's aggression had long preceded the invasion, but he wasn't just up against a hostile neighbor next door, he was up against a hostile neighbor in the West, Donald Trump. It was rough for Zelensky. Trump congratulates him, but then says military aid is being withheld until the dirt on Joe Biden is uncovered. It's a mess. Also, it weirdly becomes a competition of who's the bigger man. He eventually navigates through that crisis, and then COVID hits. So every morning, it was like he was facing some new challenge that demanded all of his attention. For Zelensky, this wasn't an issue. He was up for the challenge. But even an experienced political leader might struggle with these unprecedented challenges. Before things went, really wrong, Zelensky would wake up and exercise, spend breakfast with his family, and go to work. Now, well, I don't really think this man's getting a ton of sleep. And if he is, it's definitely in sprints and not one long regular sleeping pattern. Interesting fact, Zelensky loves shawarmas, but I don't think they're easy to come by at the moment. Any other day outside of the war would be a day of governing the country of Ukraine. But right now, the mission is to save it, keeping the lights on, keeping nuclear power plants safe and operational, trying to create exits for civilians, getting men and teens armed to fight. While millions have fled, millions of brave men and women have stayed to take up arms to fight. Their president has made them believe they can win, and everyone around the world is praying he's right. Considering the situation and Zelensky's insistence on being on the ground and in the fight, he's almost more than a wartime president. He's basically an army general. But the army is the citizens too. I don't see Putin on the front lines. He's not out there keeping up morale like Zelensky is. And if the reports are accurate, his men could use it. Though I wouldn't want a comforting morale-boosting speech from Putin. He'd probably say, "Fight for your country," or "die." Just imagine that in Russian, and you'll realize how chilling it really sounds. Afternoon. Afternoons in Kyiv aren't any better than the mornings. I mean, it's not like there's a schedule for the attacks. They happen randomly. Bombs drop randomly. It's basically a matter of constantly being prepared. I'm sure Zelensky is thinking back to the weeks and months before the war, where he'd spend the day in meetings with his government officials, working to make the country of Ukraine the better place he'd long dreamed it could be. It's ironic that if NATO had just let them in when they asked back in January, there might not have been a war in the first place. Zelensky has been trying for years to make Ukraine eligible for NATO and EU membership. Everyone decided to sit on their hands. And now look where we are. Afternoons are spent having meetings, but they're not the meetings he used to have. Now they're all about getting military aid, weapons, money, humanitarian corridors, air support, anything and everything he can. For the most part, he's getting a lot of help. Sure, it's never going to be enough, and he said that himself. But the constant pushing he's doing is getting him a hell of a lot. A lot of what he does takes place in his bunker. He doesn't usually invite the press in for interviews, but sometimes he's made exceptions, especially to appeal to the world, not just world leaders. He's become a man of the people, all the people. Now that's something. I don't think he's going to ever be forgotten. Not sure he cares about that, but it's still true. I still remember this one interview where the reporter asked him about his past acting experience and how that's helping him now. Zelensky told him, "It's very serious. It's not a movie. I'm not iconic. I think Ukraine is iconic. Ukraine is the heart of Europe. And now I think Europe sees Ukraine as something special for this world. That's why the world can't lose this something special." I don't think the question was meant to minimize things, but it was a real read the room, or I guess in this case, country, kind of moment. Evening. As evening falls on the city of Kyiv, Zelensky is back out on the streets fighting with his people, protecting the capital city from falling.
No, I can't.
When was the last time you saw them?
Before this war.
Thank you.
Just one last question. You may have already answered.
No, not before this war. No, 3 days ago. The middle part of this war. Yeah.
I think we forget so quickly that war is all hours of the day and night. It's really hard to get a moment's rest. While I'm not 100% sure if Zelensky is getting a full night's sleep, a lot of interviews I've seen of his suggest that's not the case. He's there, he's awake, but you can see he's a little more tired than he was prior to the conflict. I can imagine if I was having to spend my nights fighting for my country, out in the streets all night and day, getting very little sleep. I'd be thinking about dinner with my family. Calm, warm, and pleasant aromas, as opposed to burning buildings and devastation around me. Another thing we forget about war is how it affects families. Many people have lost their loved ones to this war. Zelensky's not seen his family in days, and likely won't see them for weeks. This is heartbreaking, considering he's not alone in this struggle as millions flee the country. Of course, between everything, Volodymyr Zelensky makes sure to get some form of food, knowing that a fighter needs to eat, even when wars are afoot. Right now, the capital city remains partially surrounded, so this war is not just afoot, it's like right there in his backyard. These days, Zelensky isn't sleeping regularly. He sleeps whenever time allows for a moment's rest. Otherwise, he's continuing efforts to protect and save his country from Russian aggression. I complain if I have to wake up even a second earlier than necessary. This man is sleeping while there's bombs dropping. I'd be cowering, thinking I'm about to get hit myself. And don't forget, they're trying really hard to kill Zelensky. This man is brazenly shaking off assassination threats and attempts. I think we're all just wondering what happens next. How does this end? There are always estimates of what might happen, but they're never definite. Even the Ukrainian government predicted an end date, and that's in May. Guess what? Their estimates assume they'll win if outside players play their part in resupplying their citizens with ammunition, weapons, and everything they can in order for them to win this war. On the other side of the border, Putin thinks he's going to win. Then again, the Kremlin's filled with liars, so maybe this is a lie too. One can hope. Zelensky did not ask for this moment, but this moment requires him. He, as a leader, and the citizens of Ukraine have proven to be a fierce force against the Russian army, and in turn, Vladimir Putin.